This is Luke Iorio, and here's this week's Meaningful Moment. As the host of The Meaningful Way, you've got to imagine that from time to time I get some pretty interesting questions, and certainly they seem to be pretty topical. Well, recently, somebody simply asked me, what makes life meaningful to me, from my view? How would I answer that question? You know, it's interesting because I started to think about a few things, but at the end of the day, I realized that there was a theme that was running through all of it, and that theme was connection. And it was a connection specifically to myself, connection to others, connection to something bigger than myself as well. So let me walk through these for a moment. And see, when I talk about connection to self, what I really mean is that I spent so long in my life trying to build myself up, trying to find a way of creating a life that had the circumstances that would make me happy. I used to define freedom, for instance, as doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want. And what I later realized in life was that freedom for me was truly to be free from anything that I felt was limiting me in any way. And primarily that meant my own belief system. It meant my own consciousness. It meant my own self-judgment and doubt. To be free of any of those types of thoughts or feelings that inhibit us in any way, and to be free of those things. And what happened is that as I started to work on those things and remove those limitations from my consciousness as best I could, and it's a forever life journey, don't get me wrong, but as I focused in that area, I started to recognize that I started to connect to a deeper or inner self that was always there. You see, when I cut through the clutter, when I cut through that ongoing, constant mind chatter, that monologue that is always running in our minds and is just keeping us busy with reflection after thought, after observation, after judgment, after whatever, over and over and over again, when you can slow that down long enough and get past it and get past all the judgments and labeling and blaming and everything else that it does, you can start to hear this other voice. And you can start to hear this quiet voice of calm and intuition. And that's what I started to connect to. And what I realized was that in that connection to my true self, as it were, and connection to that inner voice, that's where I started to find that freedom within that I was really looking for. And where that freedom came from was a high degree of acceptance, specifically acceptance of self, because I no longer was getting caught up in the different expectations I had of myself, or the limitations that I was self-imposing, or the judgments that I was putting onto myself. I was able to accept that what brought me to this point in my life just is what it is. It's how I was conditioned. Maybe it was how I was brought up. It's the experiences that I've had. And when you get to that point and accept it, then you can let yourself off the hook for so many things that otherwise you just drag around for your entire life. And then the next part of it is, it doesn't mean that you're a victim to that conditioning forever. It doesn't mean that you just accept it as is from the standpoint of, oh, I'll never change it. It means accept what is to this point, and then decide, what are you going to try to do about it? What are you going to do next? How are you going to change? And ironically, it was that path that led me to that deeper sense of self. So as you kind of go through this cycle over and over and over again, you find greater levels of freedom, greater levels of self-acceptance. And one of my guests recently, Stan Beecham, had one of the most remarkable quotes saying that self-acceptance is the greatest act of altruism that you can commit. And that really got me to think very deeply on this idea of connection to self, because it is so true in terms of the way in which we look within, and the things that we do not accept within ourselves are often the things that create so much irritation and frustration and aggravation and even fear in how we view and interact with the world, let alone how we judge others and label others from that lens. And the more we are able to accept self, the more we're able to accept others, the more we're able to greet them in ways that we might not otherwise be able to do. And so that first connection for me was connection to self. The next connection that is a big part of what makes life meaningful to me is that connection to others. You know, there just is something about, we're social beings, and we're meant to thrive in these, small tribes, as it were, whether that be our family, our work, our friends, the family we choose. It's that when we are in connection with others, we experience a different level of compassion and love and kindness that we just simply don't have on our own. We are social creatures, and that idea of connecting to others in a true, deep way is something that provides a great deal of meaning. There was even a 75-year-old study that was done out of Harvard in the adult development study, and over the course of these 75 years, and what started with several hundred men that they studied and grew into thousands of children and ultimately even grandchildren that were part of the study, what they ultimately found was that the strength of our relationships, the strength of the connection, the depth of the connection that we had to others was the single greatest predictor of our long-term well-being, including our long-term happiness and satisfaction. So it's been proven many times over that connection to others is incredibly meaningful to us. And I think what we value more so nowadays than ever before are meaningful connections, meaningful relationships. So just not that coffee talk, not the surface level, hey, how you doing? How's the weather? How about them? Fill in the name of the local sports team. It's more than that, but to truly understand what's going on for them. How are they really doing? What is it that they really desire and are trying to create for themselves in this life? The more that we're able to truly understand people at that level, the more we're able to accept them for who they are as well, the more meaningful those connections, those relationships become. And to me, that's a major part of my life and the way that I want to connect to my spouse, to my family, my kids, to my friends, because it enriches my life and they enrich my life in that regard. And then the last piece for me is this connection to something bigger, and bigger than myself, bigger than my family, bigger than just the local unit, I guess, that I'm connected to, because this is part of how I want to contribute in the world, is to be able to be part of something that helps not only those that are immediately around me, but helps and impacts many others in some type of a way, whether that be a simple way of making their day, their week a bit better, a bit easier, a bit smoother. That's where it begins. And if it can impact them in the big ways and help them find things, for instance, the reason why I'm doing the meaningful way is to contribute and help people find and ask these questions of what makes life meaningful to me. You got to answer that for yourself. My Doing the Meaningful Way podcast and doing these meaningful moments is about bringing those types of insights as well as questions to you so that you can answer them. When we do that, that's my way of beginning to pay it forward. It's my way of contributing in a bigger manner, because I know the more that we each choose our meaningful way, the more that we're going to contribute to this world, the more that we're going to contribute to our families, the more we'll contribute to our communities and our schools. And when we do that, then we are truly coming at things from a much more authentic place. And it, to me, creates a world that not only I want to live in, but hopefully we all want to live in. And so I'm going to invite you guys to consider what makes life meaningful to you. And I hope to hear from you right here on this podcast. Leave it in the comments on the social feeds. Let me know and post it up on iTunes and Stitcher. Leave some of those reviews. Leave some of those comments. I'd love to know what makes life meaningful to you.